Hi, David, and welcome to Old World Order. So I've been following you for some time now, and I've listened to many of your talks and read most of your books. And I'm really looking forward to today's discussion about Shakespeare. To exist or not to exist? Was Shakespeare even real? That's the question today.
Are you asking me to exist or not to exist? Or are you asking me, did Shakespeare exist?
Well, you exist because you're here with me today, so I'm asking whether Shakespeare really existed.
Okay, let's have a look. Since you've been always talking about Shakespeare and doing my head in, yeah, I remember when I told you he didn't exist, I remember you said, "Oh no, my life's finished. I don't believe it." Well, believe it. Okay, because...
Yeah, but how is that possible when we study Shakespeare in a national curriculum? It's compulsory.
Well, Madam
reading
Shakespeare, since you want to fight about it, let's get down to the real details. And let's have a look.
Okay.
Yes. You see this picture, Romeo and Juliet? Juliet! I love you! Oh, Juliet! I'm going to die for you! Romeo, my Romeo! Oh! Well, we all know it.
Wherefore art thou Romeo?
Yes. Well, we all know the story of Romeo and Juliet, the tragedy written by Shakespeare early in his career, according to the historians. Yes? So we all know this. Yes? So, well, I think we all know. Yes. But if you don't know, but Shakespeare wrote about Romeo and Juliet. But when we examine the details, when we examine the manuscripts, many people have done so. Yes, many people do find it's boring, in fact, studying the manuscripts. But when you study the sentencing and the structure and the gematria and many other things, many people found that there was advanced mathematical structures in the written works of Shakespeare. Mathematical structures, which showed that many of the things were constructed on purpose mathematically. Yes, for example, you could read the last sentence in the first paragraph in this, where it says, in fact, Shakespeare drew on.
In fact, Shakespeare drew on a long tradition of remarkable communications between lovers when constructing Romeo and Juliet's exchanges. This tradition, and audiences previously held notions that remarkable communication helped to define lovers' compatibility, allows the play in 19 lines to elevate the lovers' budding relationship. Oh, so right there I see.
Okay, Madam Shakespeare.
19.
Madam Shakespeare, I'll say this in easy English. Shakespeare wrote down from an old tradition, long tradition, of so-called amazing communications of how lovers communicate. Basically did the story of Romeo and Juliet. This is what one investigator is saying here. And this so-called old tradition or ancient tradition, and audiences previously held notions that these remarkable, amazing communications help to define a lover's compatibility, allows the play in 19 lines to elevate or show the lovers' relationship. So basically, you know, you can put the story of Shakespeare and Juliet into 19 lines or 19 major lines to actually show the love between them. Here you could read this. Yes, you could read this. What do we know about Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet within his work?
So it says Romeo and Juliet have barely 19 lines of...
Yeah, excuse me, are you wearing your...
I don't wear glasses, but okay.
Well, okay, since you don't wear them, what number does it say?
19, the famous 19.
Yeah, so Romeo and Juliet in Shakespeare's work basically have 19 lines of dialogue, or barely 19 lines written in the play. So...
Well, that's quite suspicious, isn't it?
Oh, well, let's not say it. We've only found 2 examples. You see, it's a bit too early. Yes, 2 is not enough. Yeah? So...
Oh, there's more.
The thing is when many people, yes, there is a lot of advice on how to write a great piece of poetry, like many people say it. And for example, here is one piece of advice, just basic advice. How to write a form.
So how to write a form poem, what a way to begin. 19 lines, 2 of them repeating 4 times each in precise places, and a rhyme scheme that never deviates from A or B. Complicated and simplistic at the same time, it's a mode made for nursery rhymes. I thought as I waded into the first chapter, a literary train wreck waiting to happen. Still, I intended to try my hand at a villanelle, and I heeded Tanya's call to look around, listen around as it were, and write the first line that came to mind. I found it easily, just outside my window.
Okay, there is a system known as villanelle, but there is also, it is well known, how to write these form poems or formal poems and other things. And the advice is, you know, if you're learning how to write poetry and other things, learn the secret of the 19. Yes? And so the thing is, there is something called villanelle. I don't know, have you heard of it?
No, I haven't heard of it.
Ah, okay. Of course, they're going to give you a bogus history. Yes? The thing is, this is upside down, but I'm sure you'll figure out how to read it. You could read it correctly. Yes? But I'll read it for you. So villanelle, they're saying it comes from Italian for rustic song or dance, or villano, or villain. Yes? Or villa, or village, and all these other words, you know, the peasants and etc., or the farmhands. This is what they're telling us is the basic meaning. But if we go to the other side of the world, yes, the thing is, there is something, the people who work in the farms or the villages or the villas, yes, are called the filas, and this is where the word filasten come from. This is another thing, many people are not aware of this. So it's not Italian, it's not, village is not an English word, it is a global word. Yes? So now the thing is, what many people are not aware of is that if you would like to do, you know, an amazing villanelle poem, yes, the thing is, let me just send you the details. Yes, so, or a form poem, or some people call it formal poem, or, you know, this basic poetry, one of the most ancient forms. So most poets, most writers, they know this secret. You could read this out. A villanelle?
The villanelle consists of 5 stanzas of 3 lines, tercet, followed by a single stanza of 4 lines, a quatrain, for a total of 19 lines.
How many lines does it consist of?
19 lines.
Well, as you could see here, people could study this more themselves. They show you the refrain and the line, the refrain, then the line, and the refrain, and then it goes on to the 19, and then the stanzas, etc. They show you so that you could set out the layout of any document. Yes? And you could set out systems of how to write books, how to put the words, the past tense, the futures, the verbs, the adjectives, or whatever you want to put, the objects and the subjects, and how you write things out. So it's not very difficult to plan something. For example, we do know that there's religious books like the Bible. The Bible also has a 19 code. Many people don't know. It's very amazing. There's many codes in the Hindu Vedas and many other books. But the thing is, once you understand the secret of this writing system, you can write great pieces of poetry, prose, or plays, as long as you start from somewhere. So the thing is, here I'm sending you more information. So this formal poetry, which is very old, what did they? You could read this. Yes, from the middle, learn to write a villanelle poem in 7 simple steps. Yes?
Okay, yeah. Discover the structure, rules, and examples of this beautiful 19-line poetic form.
Yes, and the thing is, you could set up your own structures and your own rules. Yes, and the thing is, what many people don't know is that this is one of the most ancient or oldest forms of writing poetry or prose, or things like they have in religious books and religious poetry, or things like, what they've got in many manuscripts, like in the Bible or the Vedas or the Quran. Yes? So the thing is, you could read it. The villanelle.
The villanelle originated as a simple ballad-like song in imitation of peasant songs of an oral tradition with no fixed poetic form. These poems were often of a rustic or pastoral subject matter and contained refrain. Prior to the 19th century, the term would have simply meant country song, with no particular form implied. Meaning it retains...
Okay, now the thing is, of course, they're going to give us some bogus history. But the main thing is, it was something that the ordinary people, the peasants, yeah, sorry about that. I like these people. The peasants, yes, you know, the ordinary people, it was like something going.
Yeah, the masses.
Yes, a lot of it didn't have any fixed poetic point. A lot of it could have been religious and historical. Like there used to be an oral Bible, and we still have an oral Quran. And the thing is, the villanelle and the writing system, yes, became very popular in the 18th or 19th century. Yes, and the thing is, you know, when you're writing poetry, this is something that you need to know. You have to understand it. And the thing is, in the 19th century, yes, it's very important. Why the 19th century? Notice it's the 19th. The villanelle, what do you call it? They say was revived at that time. Yes, and it became very popular, very widespread, and things like this. That is why many works that were done in Latin and in other things mysteriously had 19 lines. Yes, 19 this, 19 words, 19. The 19 became an obsessive thing in the past. It's not something new, but it's part of the secret of something that people learnt. It was like the most basic form of the origin of poetry. So if people say that they found codes with the number 19 in many written works, it's because this is something that was common. Nothing new. You see? So that's why when Shakespeare has Romeo and Juliet, and we see that there's 19 lines of the main story of communication between them, I mean, there's nothing to be amazed about, because it's something that many people already knew. Okay, let's have a look at some of the actual history and things to do with poetry and plays. So here we have, we're going to go through the entire history and Shakespeare's background. What we have is the Roman period of poetry. So you could read this out.
15 to 19 lines to the column, and says that this was a format often found in the early Roman period for poetry.
So in the Roman Empire times, according to what they're telling us, mysteriously, we had up to 19 lines for poetry or Roman poetry. Yes, so they would write things and they would have it up to 19 lines. So that's the history that they are telling us, you see. So the thing is, many people will look at these Roman poetry and other things and think, you know, it's got 19 lines, but it's nothing new. It's something that was very common, you see. And you will find it in Roman manuscripts and many other places. But what does this have to do with Shakespeare? So, for example, we're told here, you know, the Roman poets. Yes, Aeneid. Yes, you could read this.
Written by the Roman poet Virgil between 29 and 19 BC.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. What year?
19 BC.
Ah, okay. Yes. And they expect us to believe it. So what we've got is this Virgil, you know, the Aeneid, and then the thing is, he was supposed to be a great poet. And then even when we study, yes, his poetry, what we find strange is that in the manuscripts, and the manuscripts are basically 333 millimeters or 332 millimeters, and things like this. One of the oldest and most important of these Virgil manuscripts. Yes? How many lines per page?
The manuscript has 19 surviving illustrations painted by at least two artists.
Yeah, so, oh yeah, there's 19 illustrations there. but there's about 18 lines per page, including the
18 lines.
Yeah, including if you have a look at the top of some of the pages or the bottom, the notes or the introduction or whatever, it makes about 19. So it's like there's 19 lines to the page, we will notice. So when we look at these playwrights like Shakespeare, they tell us about ancient Plautus. Yes, and Plautus, they tell us, was a Roman playwright, not Shakespeare. He is somebody else. And, you know, they say it comes down to it, but you can read this in the middle. Yes. And when you look through the Plautus manuscripts, yes, there's certain indications that the original P manuscript was copied from an original manuscript with 19 or 20 or 21 lines.
In other words, it was a book very similar to A, which has 19 lines to the page, and probably it was about the same age.
What they tell us is that many of these Roman poetry were actually written in 19 lines to the page. Yes? And then what we have is very suspicious. Yes, when you look at Virgil's work, in fact, you could read this. Yes? From representatives of Italian identity. Yes, what do we find?
Virgil's partition of his opening invocation into 19 lines, directed at expressly non-urban agricultural deities, headed by the Italian, Liber, and Stella.
Well, but I don't want people have to pay attention. We will see what this has to do with Shakespeare. Yes, where it has, you know, 90 the opening invocations and other things in many of these plays. So we will compare it to Shakespeare and then compare it to Villeneuve and all these things. So the thing is, what we find connected to Shakespeare, many people know, are the triple tau. Yes. Let's see, you know, many people study this, especially when they studied Sonnet 133. Yes. And so there is something known as the triple tau, or the 3 times 3. Is very.
The triple tau.
Don't worry. I'll send you the next page. The next page goes into it more details. This is very important information about Shakespeare. You could read it from the beginning.
The theme of it, though, is not too difficult to comprehend, as the language used overwhelmingly relates to imprisonment and suffering. Consequently, his mind conjures up allusions between his Son, 1, and Jesus Christ, 33, as we remember our Saviour was 33 years old when crucified. The hypothesis receiving a significant helping hand because it appears in line 8, and the 8th letter of the Greek alphabet is theta, its ancient meaning being death, which is what came to Christ when he was crossed.
Okay. I'll stop there. And then the thing is, many people already know that in the Greek alphabet, 888 and Jesus Christ and these things in Gematria. If not, you can search it online. So they say that Jesus Christ was crucified in AD 33 at the age of 33. And the thing is, you know, when one examines Shakespeare's Sonnet 133, this is amongst the analysis. And so when it says a torment thrice threefold, thus to be crossed. Yes? So you could read that yourself, Madam Shakespeare. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. This language of Shakespeare's alludes to the triple tau which Alexander wore with his brilliant deciphering of Shakespeare's dedication to his sonnets has helped the world begin to understand in Shakespearean terms. The triple tau can be represented by the words thrice threefold or 3 times 3. A symbol venerated by the Knights Templar and the Royal Arch Freemasons, who our great author was closely associated with.
So many people know it's pretty clear, yes, you know, about Shakespeare and the triple tau. There's many other things when you go through, this is, you know, in reference to Shakespeare's Sonnet 133, yes? So when we go through Shakespeare's works and many other things, what we find is these strange things. And the triple tau is very important when one... there is a play known as The Life and Death of Richard II, Richard II, a play by Shakespeare. We're going to go through many of Shakespeare's works, and we'll see the layout, and then people can compare it to the Bible, the Vedas and the Quran, and the layout and many other things. And then when people understand these codes, and they can compare it to Stephen King or Tolkien and other things, because many people have done these things. You could read this lengthy quote in Richard II, play by Shakespeare. There is a very...
This lengthy quote consists of a single sentence uttered by John of Gaunt on his deathbed as he awaits the arrival of King Richard. The dying man wishes to confront Richard on several accounts, including the king's murder of his brother and the king's uncle, the Duke of Gloucester. This political assassination, matched with Richard's burdensome taxation schemes and decision to lease out crown lands, has desecrated England.
Because it's going on, as you can see. It's a long story, and many people think this is the history of England. People believe it. Yes, so the thing is, so the long build-up to these final lines gives, in the final paragraph, about John of Gaunt, the Duke of Lancaster, his speech, its ringing rhetorical power. So now, after praising
England's land and people for 19 lines, he concludes with a shocking reversal, emphasizes the tragedy of England's degeneration.
So John of Gaunt, so in this play, we have William Shakespeare giving praising England by John of Gaunt in his speech for 19 lines. You see? Yes? You see, so the thing is, and then after he does it, he concludes with a shocking reversal that emphasizes the tragedy of England's degeneration. Now, many people read these things and they think it's actually based on proper history. Now, for example, it sounds beautiful what Willie Shakespeare has written, and here is the actual thing. Yes, it's a very.
Why would they not believe it? Because we are presented. When we're children, we're presented with this as
the important thing is what they did is they left a code there, and this code shows that this work was not created by Shakespeare and Shakespeare didn't exist. That is what the codes show, because you will find the same codes, the same layout, the same mathematics in many of the documents. Anyway, so what we have is John of Gaunt, the Duke of... he was the Duke of Lancaster. I've always loved this story. It's supposed to have led to the Wars of the Roses. This royal throne of kings, this sceptred isle, this earth of majesty, the seat of Mars, this other Eden demi-paradise, this fortress built by nature for herself, against infection and the hand of war, this happy breed of men, this little world, this precious stone set in the silver stee, which serves in the office of a wall, or as a moat defensive to a house, against the envious of less happier lands, this blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England, this nurse, this teeming womb of royal kings, feared by their breed and famous by their birth, renowned for their deeds as far from home, for Christian service and true chivalry. This is the sepulchre in stubborn jury of the world ransom blessed Mary's Son, this land of such dear souls, this dear, dear land, dear for her reputation throughout the world, is now leased out. I die pronouncing it, like to a tenement or pelting farm. Act 2, Scene 1, lines 45 to 61. Well, I don't know.
Did you play a leading part in Shakespeare's?
I'm trying to show you. People believe this garbage. But the thing is, it's 19 lines. The main thing is, why did whoever write this thing, why did they do it in 19 lines? And the sonnet, the triple taus for the Greek letter tau. You could read this yourself. What do we know about the Greek letter tau?
So, tau is the 19th letter of the Greek alphabet, and in the Greek numeral system, 300 was represented by this symbol.
Wait a minute. It's the what letter in the Greek alphabet?
It's the 19th letter.
19. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. And so now the thing is, many organizations use this the triple tower, the 3-letter T's. And what's it called?
The Royal arch is a degree of Freemasonry.
Yes.
The Royal Arch is present in all main Masonic systems.
Yeah, in all main Masonic systems, and it is worked as part of the mainstream machinery or masonry. In other words, if you know the secret of the triple Tau or the Tau, you can do it. Now, then there is another thing. There is the other thing that people call, like a cross. Now, you need 4 Taus for a cross, the T-shaped. Yes? Known as the Cotton's cross potent, or as the Crooken cross, or something like that. But basically, you could see it. Here is the cross. Yeah, it looks cool. It looks nice. But the thing is, many people don't seem to know the history of this. Now, when you read the history of this, it sounds ridiculous. Yes, the history that they're telling us, it comes from the Bible. So now, in this picture, what do we see? What's in the picture?
Oh, we see the Apostle Peter crucified upside down in Rome, AD 69.
Ah, so they decided to crucify somebody upside down. What the hell's going on?
You tell me.
Okay, now, so now you will soon start to understand. So let's look at the triple Tau again. So now when you look at the triple Tau, it's like this. And it's got 1 cross missing. So to turn it into 4 crosses, yes, which one is missing? Which cross is missing?
The bottom one.
And the bottom one, all you do is the top cross. What do you do to the top cross? You turn it.
Hold it down.
What?
You've got to turn it upside down.
Ah, so what happened to the Apostle Peter? Look at the picture carefully. Can you see his arms?
Yeah.
It's a cross. Yeah, so they show us these images, they tell us these stories, and they expect us to believe it. In fact, you could read this. So the triple Taus, yes, the 3 T's, are the triple 19s, the 3 19s of the Greek alphabet. The T, Tau, is the 19th, because the New Testament is written in Greek in the Bible. The triple Tau?
The triple T's of this ancient symbol are Tau crosses, said to represent the 3 crosses of cavalry, with the cross of Jesus in the center and the 2 crosses of the thieves, Gestas and Dismas, on either side.
Yeah, the crucifixion, or the 3. So now the 4th cross.
If a 4th T is added to the triple Tau, it becomes a 4T cross, known as a cross potent or crutch cross, in which the 4th T, depicted upside down, is said to represent the 4th cross of St. Peter, who, having thrice denied Christ, was crucified upside down in Rome in AD 69.
Yeah, and everybody knows, we all talk about it when we were young in school, a 69er, the 6 and the 9, it's upside down. Yeah, Christ is crucified in the year 33, or the 33rd degree. You see? Yes? And so 69, 6 and 9, they're upside down from each other. You see? So that's why they said Peter was crucified upside down in the year 69. It's all just fake, bogus history. Can you see it, or you cannot see it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Everyone knows what a 69er is. They make these jokes, male and female, and all these things. So people make these jokes. So that's what this 69 is about. So that's why they said St. Peter got crucified in the year 69 AD. People believe it. They just invented this history. It was based on a joke, and they're laughing. When you think about this history, I'm sure you're trying to laugh, but because we're in public, you're not laughing. Yes, and you're trying to be serious. I'll laugh for you. It's a joke. This history is a joke.
Why are they filling our education system with this big joke?
I don't know. I think you should give them a call. Why don't you call them? I think you should call them. So now, when the numbers 6 and 9 are upside down, when people study this history, or if you're going to ask, the official historians will say, why was he crucified upside down? Let's see.
So according to tradition, St. Peter was crucified upside down because he felt unworthy to die in the same manner as Jesus Christ.
Sure. I believe it. Don't you believe? Don't you believe it?
Yeah.
Yes. So the thing is, it becomes a joke. So now the thing is that everyone, in case people are wondering who he was, they say he was one of the apostles. Yes. All the followers of Christ and all these things, blah, 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 blah. And so now when we come to it, you could read the last sentence. So Saint Peter, you could read the first sentence. Saint Peter, also known as?
Saint Peter, also known as Peter the Apostle, Simon Peter.
What did you say? Simon. He's also known as Simon Peter. So now go to the last.
In the New Testament, the name Simon Peter is found 19 times.
How many times?
19.
Madam Shakespeare. Are you beginning to see a little bit of a pattern? So now the thing is, what many people don't know is that if you study many of these, like here, is supposed to be for magic. Yes, the book of black magic. Yes, and here are some of the keys of black magic, if people understand it. Yes, you have the Stars of David, and you put the Tau inside. This is a magical circle. Yes, and the magic triangle. So what you will do is have that, and you will have the 19 surrounding it. There's 4 of the Taus. Can you see it? The letter T is the Greek Taus. Yeah, so that's why there's got to be 4. Yes, so the thing is, it's got something to do with this, you know, the key of Solomon or the ring of Solomon. Yes, that's why we have a ring and a circle around it. So the thing is, for example, you can use medicine to, you know, put too much medicine and you can kill someone. You could use it to kill someone, or or give the correct amount of medicine, and you can save somebody's life. So the thing is, you can use some things, you know, for magic, or you could use something for good. Yes, the number 19 is not evil, it's just a number. So now, let's say, you know, Madam Shakespeare, you always used to say to me, oh, Shakespeare exists. I'm sure, I don't know.
So if you say Shakespeare doesn't exist, though, then are you...
It's a bit too early to ask these questions, darling.
Oh, is it?
Yes, let's examine a bit more. Do you know this book by Shakespeare?
Macbeth, yes, I do, yeah.
Yes. So it's a famous work by Shakespeare. They're telling us it's centuries old, and it's a tragedy. Macbeth. So now, let's go to Macbeth, and let's examine Macbeth. And what do we find? You could read this.
We glimpse a liberating potential, wrestled with these perhaps contradictory stage directions, especially confusing since the head of the defeated Macbeth is brought on stage 19 lines later.
Yeah, so Macbeth, you know, basically when they've chopped his head off or whatever, or when he's defeated, how they're acting out the play, they bring it on stage. Normally when they're playing it out, 19 lines later, you see. And if anybody studies many of these things, the number 19 is a main feature in many of these so-called Shakespeare's works. Yes, and so for example, there's no exact exit for the dead body. Many people have showed them. One of the Macbeths, must we go off at once, for after 19 lines the folio direction reads enter Macduff with Macbeth's head. You see? So that's what it's like when you're acting out the play. You see? Yes? Can you see it? That it's 19 lines. So the thing is, you know, I don't know if you've read Macbeth, but many people have, or they've seen the play. Yeah, so we've got Lady...
Actually, I read it last week.
Last week, okay. Okay, Madam Shakespeare, do you remember Lady Macduff?
Yeah.
Okay, now read this, Macbeth.
Macbeth is most famous for expanding the role of Lady Macduff, augmenting the mere 19 lines afforded the character in Shakespeare's text.
Yes, so what we're seeing is that the character...
Lady Macduff is the wife of someone else who was killed.
So the thing is, then there is... at the end of Act 4, there's many things. Many people have done their assessments, and they've gone through it, and they've found so many of these codes and passages to do with 19. Yes? And so There's many passages. You could read this.
On stage, Lady Macbeth's lines cover the killing. She hears her husband's 19 lines until he gets to "she married."
Or something like that. I'm not sure what that is. People could read this themselves. There's many scenes in that Macbeth which are something to do with the number 19. Like here is another one. I'm not sure which scene this is, but just before Act 4. Yes, you could read this.
19 lines into the scene, the act division might have been interpolated in order to provide a suspenseful pause at the end of Act 4.
So there's many things and many suspicious divisions that go into, but there's some strange codes, even letters, layouts, everything, almost as if somebody has written this digitally or something. So have a look. What Shakespeare says about Jews.
The word takes on many connotations in Shakespeare, most of them negative. This says little, however, about Shakespeare's own attitudes toward Jews, since many of the speakers who use the word are drawn as anti-Semites. In MV, which contains 90% of the references, the Jew and Jew often merely replace Shylock's name, frequently with disapprobation or disgust. This happens most often during the trial scene, where Portia and Gratiano use Jew 19 times for Shylock's name. The anti-Semitism of some of the Christian characters in MV also reveals that for them, words like kindness and gentle can only modify.
Yes, so you see, this is suspicious again. During the trial scene of to do with a Jewish character, yeah, we see that. What does MV stand for? What play is that?
It's the Merchant of Venice, Merchant of Venice.
Well done. Yes. Madame Shakespeare. Well done, the Merchant of Venice. Yes, so as you can see, in case people are wondering what is the Merchant of Venice, it's they're telling us it's from the 16th century. Yes, a Christian shipping merchant. Yes, the story of a Christian shipping merchant and things like this. And so they bring in somebody Jewish because they're trying to show the fake history that's given to the Jewish people and saying the Jews were the blood murderers, bloodsuckers, and all this in Europe. Yes, during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. So that's what they're trying to show. Yes, so they show, these things were common at the time. The world was racist towards the Jewish people. That's what they're trying to show. But it's just invented history. They've put it in these plays. They act them out. They put them on television shows. And many people actually believe that, hey, this is actual history in Europe, in England and in Europe. But many people don't know that it's mathematically organized in many things. It's clear it's mathematically organized. Yes, that during the trial scene in The Merchant of Venice, Portia and Gratiano use the word Jew 19 times for Shylock's name, addressing him as a Jew. So during the trial, so we've got these things, and these things are not accidental. Whoever did them on purpose. So this is The Merchant of Venice, and of course, let's have a look at Caesar. Hail Caesar, mighty Caesar. I would like you to complete this sentence, which is famous for Julie or Julius. Friends, Romans.
Friends, Romans.
You mean you don't know Madame Shakespeare?
No, countrymen, friends, Romans,
countrymen. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lend me your ears.
Yes. So here we have Julius Caesar. The alleged play by William Shakespeare. They've made so many plays, films, etc., things like this, and they're saying it's a history play, a tragedy, etc. And they're saying, yeah, this was real history. That's why he actually wrote these books and all these other history books. But let's examine a lot of these things. So the thing is, when we go through the play of Julius Caesar, for example, you could read this.
Okay, so in the play Julius Caesar, when Mark Antony gives his Brutus, so when after name dropping Brutus and his honour 5 times in the span of 19 lines, Antony says that judgment
etc. This is one of the major scenes where his honor is mentioned basically 5 times in the space of 19 lines. And it's a thing many people have noticed. Many people have noticed this. Another great play by William Shakespeare is, Hamlet. Yes? Hamlet. Yeah. We're going to come back to this because people will say, hey, that's flimsy. It's not enough evidence to show that there's something strange about this number and the coding in the works. Don't worry, we're going to go through it. So here is Hamlet. Yes? And many people have heard of Hamlet by Shakespeare. So now you could read this, in Gertrude's room. Yes?
In Gertrude?
No, not this.
Polonius?
Yeah, well, Gertrude is a character. Yes? So the thing is, Gertrude is a character. You can read this.
She drinks, knowing before she does that she will die. When Gertrude does die, a mere 19 lines after finally directly contravening Claudius's.
So now there is something strange here. Gertrude does die. This is the main thing in the actual book, and it's after 19 lines of something. She dies exactly 19 lines after going against Claudius's. Yes? So the thing is, William Shakespeare, we're told these plays, we believe these manuscripts, we think they're old. There's a book, The Troublesome Reign of King John, King of England. Yes, an Elizabethan history play, probably by George Peele. Yes, and some people say it is accepted by scholars to be the source and model that William Shakespeare used for his own King John. So Shakespeare wrote a work known as King John. And they say he probably copied it from this troublesome. People are questioning, yes, the authenticity, whatever. And the thing is, if you're going to invent history, you control both sides. Same like if you're going to create a war, you control both sides. When we examine Shakespeare's work here, yes, Sir John Oldcastle and the construction of Shakespeare's authorship. So it says, what they do is many people have examined the works to see who wrote them, when, why. And they said, a decade ago, the editors of the Oxford William Shakespeare, The Complete Works, replaced the name of the capital called Falstaff in Henry IV, Part 1, with a hypothetically early version of the character's name, Sir John Oldcastle. The restoration of Oldcastle to the Oxford edition makes it, the first authoritative text to do so, etc. Yes, it says, what does it say? The title page for the 1600 edition of Sir John Oldcastle indicates that the play was printed for Thomas Pavier. It just goes on, and it says basically that to publish a collection of Shakespeare's plays 3 years after Ben Jonson's folio works and 4 years, etc. Like the striking, it just goes on and on and on. It's just boring. Yes, they're telling us, some report or something. And then we come down to it. This brief but typical episode. Yes, in the ongoing struggle between the early modern playhouse and the printing houses raises unsettling questions about the status of Shakespeare's authorship, especially when viewed from the perspective of current laws of intellectual property and Shakespeare's singular position in our culture. Pavier must have known in 1600 that the quarto he published was the collaboratively authored property of Henslowe. Carry on reading.
How could he republish it 19 years later as a Shakespeare play?
While it is impossible to answer with certainty. So they're telling us these stories of questions of authorship. There's King John and these other plays, who really wrote them, and then goes out and publishes this one 19 years later, and the thing is, if people want, they can read up and study these things themselves. Let's get to Richard III. When people look at Shakespeare, they really think these kings existed and everything. So, Richard III, what do we know of the story, according to Shakespeare?
He manipulates Edward into imprisoning their brother Clarence and then has Clarence murdered in the Tower. Richard's agents murder the imprisoned Clarence.
Yeah, so now when we look through Shakespeare's work and examine details of this story, what do we find? You could read it in Richard III.
In Richard III, the second murderer prepares to kill Clarence. He reassures his companion why he shall never wait until the great judgment day. There appears to be some substance in Meredith Skura's argument that scene 19 of King Lear served as a source for the murder of Clarence. The characters and plot situations could hardly be more alike. Other reoccurring engrams, however, are contextually dissimilar. The messenger tells Regan...
Anyway, the main thing is, yes, that people have noticed that there's similar patterns and similar things between Shakespeare's books within themselves and other books. Maybe in a future interview, if we do one together, we will talk about some of his other books. But what we do find is that many people have found that, the source for the murder of Clarence is actually found in scene 19 of Shakespeare's work, King Lear. And so many people think that these things, they think it's actually based on real history and real whatever, and they're saying Shakespeare was actually just rewriting history and repeating it and turning it into plays with his own additions and subtractions. So the thing is, they created the fake history. They wanted it to be realistic and things. So they did this in other countries also, not just in England. Yes? And so let's have a look at the so-called history of Shakespeare, what they're telling us. You could read this.
New Place was William Shakespeare's final place of residence in Stratford-upon-Avon. He died there in 1616.
Okay.
The whole building was...
Okay. Yes. But the thing is, he died there in 1616. Notice the funny number. It sounds funny to me. Yes? So the thing is, let's read about New Place.
New Place, the handsome residence on the corner of Chapel Street and Chapel Lane, which the 33-year-old Shakespeare had bought in 1597, and where 19 years later he died.
Whoa! So he bought this when he was 33 years old, and he died there 19 years later. I don't think there's anything suspicious there, do you?
No, it's just normal figures.
Ah.
Normal numbers.
Ah, I see. I think you're lying to me. I don't believe you. I find it 100% crazy and suspicious. Yes,
yeah,
considering, the 19 that I've pointed out in other works and in other places, it's nothing but Bullstein. Sorry, Madam Shakespeare. Yes, but the Shakespeare, my ass. Yeah, I don't seem to believe that he existed. Yes, we're nowhere near. So the thing is, that's why in my books I explained a bit more. In my book Secrets of Kabbalah, I explained what is the 19. And then how the 19 is the 33rd degree. I explained this, and many people are already aware that the number 33 and the 33 degrees. So now the thing is, the more we look into the pattern, I've not even started yet into Shakespeare. This is just the icing on the cake. So the thing is, when we look at it deeper, we will find that there is something seriously wrong with the history that they're telling us about Shakespeare. Yes? So these things...
Do you think people are ready for this radical change in the understanding of history?
Well, Madam Shakespeare, you weren't ready. You weren't ready. Well, let's finish our video and our conversation, and then I will ask you, did your dear, darling William Shakespeare, did he even exist? I'll ask you then. Right now, you're complaining to me saying, why are they teaching it in school, dear David? If it's not true, it must be true. I mean, there's so much evidence, there's so much work there. Yes, but who said that they didn't invent
there's a whole. You've got the whole town of Stratford-upon-Avon with his house and the museums.
Yeah, he lived there for 19 years in his house. He brought it when he was 33. Sure, I believe all this stuff. We'll let the audience decide if you want to fight about this, darling. But now let's have a look at this. Yes. So let's study the age of of the story of so-called, his Renaissance plays and his life story. So go to the final sentence. You could start from, it's 5 lines above the bottom. At the age of 13, Shakespeare was?
At the age of 13, Shakespeare was sufficiently educated in the great outlines of the traditional Renaissance curriculum established over 500 years earlier in Charlemagne's reorganization of the palace school at Aachen to leave old school and to assist his father in the family trade of glove making. His schooling, at least, had been a sufficient preparation for life, and when 19 years later he came to London, the capital city of the nation, then at the apogee of its Renaissance development.
Well, we seem to have, 19 years in Shakespeare's life. He buys a house, he dies 19 years later. And so they've tried to make us believe in the entire history of Europe. Charlemagne and Aachen Cathedral. Yes, and they're saying, he studied there. They're trying to show that Europe was connected, Anglo-Saxon history and all this garbage in Middle Ages. But what we're beginning to see is just, he went there 19 years later and then he became a playwright and whatever. Yes? And so they tell us many different stories and they think, and people believe them, Shakespeare was murdered, don't you know? They spread half these conspiracies themselves and all these things because they want you to think he actually existed. None of it's true. None of the stories are true or anything. He didn't exist. The documents were written by the people in power, and they wrote similar plays and poetries for all over the world. The same group of people did it, and many people will say they used the Masonic arts, but the evidence seems to show that they actually used technology. It's like many people are saying it. You could read it.
Only William Shakespeare of Stratford-on-Avon never wrote the plays and poems.
Yes, many people are saying this because they found that the thing is, it doesn't sound realistic. His story, life, everything doesn't make sense. But
are there any original manuscripts of his plays? Are there any original manuscripts of Shakespeare's plays? Are they in the museums?
We're going to go through them, darling. Don't worry. Don't you worry, Madame Shakespeare. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't call you darling, or maybe William will get jealous. I don't want to make him jealous. It's not fair. Well, anyway, the thing is when people ask about did Shakespeare write his books or something? So here we have Calvin Hoffman. Yes? And so who is Calvin Hoffman? You could read this.
Can't see that. Oh yeah, Calvin Hoffman, a Broadway press agent and sometime writer, published The Murder of the Man Who Was Shakespeare in 1955. The book, now long out of print, has been very influential in Moravian circles. Yeah.
Well, anyway,
Michael Rubin.
So there's many people who are studying Shakespeare, yes, and they're questioning, yes, did Shakespeare write his books? So now the thing is, when we look at these documents, if you are the New World Order, you are going to control both sides, yes or no?
Yeah.
So let's see if Calvin Hoffman really investigated Shakespeare. So now let's see what he says when I first began. Read it.
When I first began my researches more than 19 years ago into the problem of Shakespeare authorship, I had no wish to add my contribution to a literary recreation.
If anybody understands the codes of Tao or the 19 or Masonry or the codes of many of these organizations, or if you understand the 19 secrets or the 19 lines for poetry, then you will understand, yes, that his research that he did for 19 years is just bullstein. And he's trying to say Shakespeare didn't write it, but they're creating an alternative story. You see? So it's both sides.
Yeah.
So these people, yes, are working for the same group and the same people in power. Yes, the same people who wrote Shakespeare are now writing these things about Shakespeare. It's the same group. So, for example, Madame Shakespeare, Yes, the Shakespeare sessions. You could read this. What?
So back in 1984, a television program came out in Britain called Playing Shakespeare, and it starred some of the stars from the Royal Shakespeare Company, including Ian McKellen, Patrick Stewart, Judi Dench, David Suchet, Ben Kingsley, and more.
Famous people in England at the time. Anyway.
Yep. It also featured the co-founder of the RSC, John Barton, who hosted the program and helped educate the general public and aspiring actors on how to perform a Shakespearean play. 19 years later...
Excuse me! What happened? Start again.
19 years later, maybe they're just real big fans of
What happened 19 years later? Get to the point, Madam Shakespeare. What happened?
19 years later, a sequel of sorts called The Shakespeare Sessions came to be, except that this time the actors are American and it was filmed in New York City. Helping Barton this time around is Kevin Kline, Cynthia Nixon, David Hyde Pierce, Charles S. Dutton, Lynn Collins, Liev Schreiber, and Dustin Hoffman.
Well, I'm sure that you cannot see anything. Maybe it was this, maybe it was that. You could talk like one of Shakespeare's fans. Maybe. But the thing is, the people at the top, they know. Yes? And the thing is, in case some people are asking about this John Barton Shakespeare, yes? The thing is, mysteriously in England, then in America 19 years later. Yes, and this, what will they say? So, about this, An Actor's Guide by John Barton. Yes, Playing Shakespeare.
A practical and essential guide. Playing Shakespeare will stand for years as the authoritative favourite among actors, scholars, teachers and students.
Of course it's going to stay for years. They made sure they started it in England and 19 years later, they did it in America. Of course, they followed the code. You see? Yes. So the thing is, it's not just there. So now let's have a look. Yes. And one of the have you heard of Raffaello Sanzio?
No.
You mean you don't know Raffaello Sanzio, Madam Shakespeare?
Raffaello Sanzio.
Not of Sanzio. Yes, he's a more recent guy. But the thing is, what do you call it? Yes, Raffaello Sanzio. Yes, is is an Italian experiential theatre company founded in 1981. Yes, and things like that. There was another guy called Raphael Sanzio in the Middle Ages and things like that. But that's what they will say. But anyway, so the Shakespeare thing is continental throughout Europe. So. The Society of Raffaello Sanzio. You can read this.
When it was first staged in 1997, Societas Raffaello Sanzio's Julius Caesar, Baird parts, was celebrated as a radical take on one of Shakespeare's more popular Roman plays. Now, 19 years later, cut down to a running time of just 55 minutes and presented in an intimate studio space inside the Shakespeare Theatre in Gdansk. This is a revisitation rather than a revival.
So as we can see, there's many of these things even today. They're showing the shows, doing this and that, and they're following the code. Stick to the code, you see? So many of these managers, other people, and everything. So Julius Caesar spare parts, in case they're wondering, what it was, what this thing was, 19 years later. Yes, in case many people don't know these things. So it's like, what is this?
A condensed version of the historic production of Julius Caesar staged in 1997, one of the most groundbreaking and subversive works ever created.
Oh yeah, they created it 19 years later after Raffaello Sanzio's Society. Yes, so we can see that there is something strange going on. You see? Yes? And so the thing is, everybody, many people who know Shakespeare. So now, if we go into his life, yes, there is Globe Theatre. Have you heard of Globe Theatre?
Yeah, that's very famous.
What is Globe Theatre?
It's the theatre production.
Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. Yes, And they're saying Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, they tell us this, that, everything, and they're giving us some bogus history about this place. People believe it, and the things like this, and then they try to imagine it, and they've done reconstructions and everything. You see, because they're trying to show what it was like back in the days and everything, and people believe these things. And they're saying, oh, this is what it was like at the end of the Middle Ages, in the Renaissance. Well, you
it was on the River Thames. It was built on the bank of the River Thames.
Well, I don't know where it was built, but it was really there. It's the Globe Theatre. Yeah, Madam Shakespeare, this is actual history. Let's find out about the Globe Theatre, okay? Now here, you can read this.
There was a fire.
You believe the story? I don't want to know it. I'll let you read what I sent you. Okay, now read, Madam Shakespeare. Read the real history. What did William Shakespeare do?
Okay, he acquired shares in the Globe Theatre and came to make money by various business interests. He did so well that in 1597, at the age of 33, 19 years before his death, he purchased the second best house in Stratford, where he later was able to pass.
So the history, it's based there. If he didn't have Globe Theatre, he can't buy the house because he won't have the cash. So by the age of 33, he made cash. You see?
Yeah.
Yeah, so all the stories, things like this, and, people believe these stories. If you want to believe it, you can believe it. Yes? And so the thing is, we're told similar stories of the time and the history around the time when Shakespeare lived. If anybody wants to study the history of Queen Elizabeth, and what do we find, at the time? Yeah? Well, at the time of Shakespeare himself, what can we find? You could read this yourself.
Okay. England's fear as the 1580s progressed was that if Spain succeeded in extinguishing the independence of the Protestant, Dutch and Flemish communities, it would then turn its power toward a religious crusade against England. In summer 1585, Elizabeth recognized that she had no choice but to support the Low Countries and sent English military forces there to help defend them. Thus began the Anglo-Spanish War that did not end until 19 years later, when King James signed a peace treaty with Spain.
Ah, how very lucky that during Shakespeare's life, England was at war with Spain for 19 years. Yes? And what was this war about anyway? A bit more to do with Elizabeth. Go to the next paragraph. The war represented...
The war represented a direct threat to the continuation of Elizabeth's reign. In June 1587, following the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, the Pope issued a papal bull calling on all English subjects to rise up and depose her.
Ah, so many people believe these stories and everything. Let's just have a look at this story that she got Mary killed. Yes? And 1587 or something. Yes? So
19 years later, in 1586, a major plot to murder Elizabeth was reported and Mary was brought to trial.
Ah, I see. So now we've got this other story, yes, of Mary, in the 19 years, who gets Mary, the Queen of the Scots. And people believe these stories. Yeah, people believe...
Yes, it's from the History Channel.
Come on, we're talking official history. Do you think I made this up? It's the boys with the 19, the men in black, who made this up. You think I wrote this history? And people believe this history. We're shown paintings, pictures, writings. Everything was invented, written and planned during and after the Renaissance. And then they perfected the extra writing and the Bulstein writings and manuscripts in the 19th century. And we're even continuing it, updating it in the 20th century. It's just a joke, you see? Yes. So it's just a joke. You can't miss these things. So when people talk about Romeo and Juliet, many people have always asked, there's a romantic story in the 20th century by Nicholas Shakespeare. He's not related to Shakespeare at all. Yes, but they say Romeo and Juliet, there's this great Shakespeare, Nicholas Shakespeare, who writes a story, yes, about a love story. Yes, of East Germany and West Germany. Yes, that many people see. So we have, just 50, 60 years ago. Yes, and the thing is, people were terrified, of the secret police and things like this. So there is this Nicholas Shakespeare who's writing about East Germany and West Germany and the Berlin Wall, a terrible time after the Nazis and the communists. And so he's writing this story, yes. And the thing is, even in many of these stories, yes, and so many people at that time, they mentioned Shakespeare and they said 4 centuries later, another Shakespeare, yes, even though they're not related. So this book is called Snowleg, yes. So now, what do you call it? When we know about the story, you could read it from near the bottom, but the romance in the middle ends quickly. What do we know about this book? He writes Snowleg.
But their romance ends quickly and badly when his scheme to smuggle her out of the country goes awry and he is forced to return to England. When the two Germanys are reunited, 19 years later, Peter goes back to look for the woman he has never stopped loving.
How many years later did he go back? I'm sure you're making a mistake here.
It's 19 years
19 years later. When Germany was reunified. So, we've got another Shakespeare here, and he's no relation of him whatsoever. So you see, we have something strange going on here. And so this shows the story, East and West Germany, and the divisions and the love story, an amazing love story. Related to this name, it doesn't matter. These people who are at the top know this story, and there's something going on, and they're using this number 19. So now the thing is, we have this here. You could read the last column.
Camden's best-selling work, Britannia, the first topographical survey of England. It was published in 1586, the same year Edward de Vere first received his mysterious lifetime annuity from the English crown. 19 years later, in 1605, Camden released a sequel and supplement to Britannia, appropriately titled Remains of a Greater Work.
So now we've got somebody, not William Shakespeare, but William Camden here, yes, who's living at the same time as Shakespeare, and he's written a topographical survey of England. So we've got many of these manuscripts that people are showing me, yes, like historical manuscripts, and they're saying, they printed them, can't you see? We had the printing press, and everything. I've already told people that many of these things it's just bogus and it's fake. So what we have here is that Camden's book, Britannia, the Topographical Survey, was published in the time of Shakespeare. The same year, Edward de Vere first received his first mysterious lifetime money from the English crown. 19 years later, in 1605, Camden released his, sequel or part 2 of Britannia. You see? Yes? To show the topography of England, like maps and many other things. All these things are just bogus history, fake manuscripts and everything that they've produced only in the last 100, 200 years. They're showing us these things, these paintings, saying, look, we've got paintings of him. Look, we've got the manuscripts. We've got this, that. This is what England actually looked like 400 or 500 years ago. You see? And it says it's the best known author. Yeah? An English antiquarian, historian, etc., survey of the British Isles, etc., the first detailed historical account of the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. You see? So when we look at this, there's many other works. We're going to go through them. Yes? And then you can decide in the end if Shakespeare existed or is it the entire history of the 16th and 15th and 17th century alive. Not just Shakespeare. In fact, I'm going to show that the entire history is a lie. So the thing is, here many people say we tend to assume Shakespeare wrote it. Many people are saying Shakespeare wasn't even written by one person. It must have been written by several people or many people. People have found that there is something wrong with his works, like Macbeth. Yes, so the thing is, this is going to be a bit long. Read it. So there is a problem. There are problems with Shakespeare's Macbeth. And the thing is, here people talk about the problems, and I'll read it very fast. We tend to assume that a writer is a solitary genius, relying on imagination to create works that are largely self-contained. However, this belief is at odds with the realities of theatrical production and performance in Shakespeare's day. Playwriting was largely a collaborative enterprise. When a company wanted to put on a new play or revive an old one, a writer or a team of writers was assigned to come up with the script. Scripts for new plays typically retold a story already in circulation. Scripts for revival augmented elements that had proven popular in previous stagings. Removed less successful elements and updated any topical references. Gary Taylor points out that Shakespeare would not be excluded from this process of having his scripts adapted. Basically, people are saying Shakespeare didn't write them. These stories have been going around before, or other people wrote them, and then whoever wrote these things, they wrote them down for the final manuscripts, etc. So the thing is, now people have examined Hamlet and Macbeth and many of the books, and they say we can see this process at work by comparing two texts of Hamlet, the second quarto of 1604 Q2 and the first folio of 1623 F. Act 2, Scene 2 in the folio text has some 15 prose lines where Rosencrantz and Guildenstern explain to Hamlet why the players are down on their luck. Now let's see what problems people found. Yes, and then when we go through, he goes through the story and something, and basically this question Hamlet asks, is it possible? And then Guildenstern replies, there has been much throwing about of brains. Hamlet says, do the boys carry it away? Rosencrantz replies, aye, they do, my lord. Hercules and this load too. You can continue the rest.
As this answer to a different question describes, this passage alluding to the new fashion for child actors that arose in 1600 is important in dating Hamlet to 1601. Yet the passage is cut from the Q2 text of 1604 and is found only in F some 19 years later.
What? Are you trying to tell me this passage was missing and you found it in another manuscript? How many years later?
It was 19 years later.
So there's something wrong with the Hamlet manuscript? So which one is the original? The one 19 years later or the one 19 years before? Which one can I depend on?
Neither.
So the thing is, these people have left their code there, you see? So now, King John, the first ever Shakespeare that they ever made a video of Shakespeare on a video. In fact, this is one of the first ever, in 1899. That's what they say. One of the first British biograph films reached a very wide audience. This is what they're telling us. Amongst the most exciting discoveries in the Dutch collection of King John made in 1899 and the first ever Shakespeare film. The first ever Shakespeare film, 1899. Its discovery rewrote that corner of Shakespearean film history, culminating in part of a single short film featuring in a Shakespeare montage for the 1997 Academy Awards broadcast, viewed by millions of people in the world. But anyway, this is the first ever Shakespeare film. Yes, this is the history that they're telling us. And they're telling us that it was basically, they're telling us it was lost until the Dutch found it. And then when we examine the details of this, we find that there is some suspicious history in this. And what they're telling us, here is a picture of the Biograph 68mm film and IMAX prediction film. And it says, but one thing was missing. Biograph films were made on 68mm films, but we were showing them as 35mm reductions. To get the real Biograph effect, the sheer astonishment or whatever more particular. So now what they're doing, they're having problems with the films. Yes, so they're saying we knew that Biograph films were particularly the same shape as IMAX, especially IMAX turned on its side. So there's a problem. They had to modify the films and everything to, recreate it so that people could watch these Shakespeare things in the IMAX production. So now you could read this yourself.
It has taken a while, but 19 years later, Biograph has at last come home. Last night at the London Film Festival, the BFI IMAX presented the Great Victorian Moving Picture Show, a programme of British biograph films, together with other large format 60mm films of the period made by Prestwick and Ormond.
Well, we basically got the message. It took them 19 years after these films mysteriously disappeared, and then they were rediscovered in Holland, and it took them 19 years to get the production going. Nothing suspicious about that, is there? Nothing.
No, nothing.
No,
Nothing
it's only just another 19. So you see, and they called it IMAX presented the Great Victorian Moving Picture Show. So that's what they presented. Here it is, in case if anybody wants to examine it. And then the film show at the 2018 gala, because they showed it in 2018. And remember that the films were rediscovered after they mysteriously disappeared. Yes, in 1997. I showed it before, so it was 19 years later. So the thing is, around the time of Shakespeare, we have the strange history and everything that they're telling us of Queen Elizabeth and Henry VIII and all these other things. Yes, and we've all heard of Henry VIII, the story that they're telling us. Henry VIII and his so-called wives, and many people, we believe these stories. We see pictures and we think he was a real king of England, Elizabeth's dad, Queen Elizabeth I's dad. We believe these stories and everything, so they've been telling us, but just a simple examination of the history of that time. More information about Henry VIII and the Spanish and Elizabeth and Mary. A little more information is in the book Napoleon Didn't Exist. But anyway, you could read the first paragraph of this.
The fraught history of England's long Reformation is a convoluted, if familiar story. In the space of 25 years, England changed religious identity 3 times. In 1534, England broke from the papacy with the Act of Supremacy that made Henry VIII head of the church. 19 years later, the act was overturned by his daughter Mary, only to be reinstated at the accession of her half-sister Elizabeth.
I see. So now what we have is Henry VIII, said, hey, I'm protesting against the Catholic Church and going away. But 19 years later, Mary reinstates it. Wow. So as we can see, 19 years later, after Henry says no to the church, Mary says yes to the Catholic Church. The 19. Nothing suspicious about that. We have this suspicious history of Queen Elizabeth at the time of William Shakespeare. Yes, that there is something wrong. Yes, that, it just doesn't make sense. That Henry VIII gets rid of the Catholic Church. 19 years later, Mary brings it back. Yes, so we're finding this. Let's compare some of the Shakespeare to the history of the time and other related things in the 15th, 16th century, or whatever you want to call it. So you could read all this.
According to historians, a famous British warship was at the Battle of Trafalgar, called the HMS Victory, and it is found in Portsmouth, England. In Portsmouth, there is another famous warship called the Mary Rose. Historians say that HMS Victory and Mary Rose are the most important warship in British history. The ship called the Mary Rose also fought against the French, but during another war. The warship sunk while it was fighting against the French during the Battle of the Solent on 19th of July, 1545. The warship had a history of around 33 years.
What date was it?
The 19th of July.
Ah, okay. So if anybody wants to go to see the ship, yeah, they can go to the Mary Rose Museum in Portsmouth to see the ship. That was another ship named like Mary. It sunk, around that time, on the 19th of... this is the history that they're telling us, these ships, these histories, these museums. But then let's find out about the ship. Tell us about the ship Mary Rose.
According to historians, after the Mary Rose warship sunk 19th July 1545, it was discovered again in 1971. Around 19,000 historical items were found together with the Mary Rose warship.
Sure. They found 19,000 items. I'm sure you believe it. Let's see. Of course, when you find a ship that's been sunk in the sea for many years, it will take a long time to repair it. These wooden ships and everything are. Let's see, what do they tell us?
Historians say that it took many years to repair the Mary Rose warship. For example, the ship was sprayed with a special chemical wax for 19 years.
Bullshit! Well, how many years? How many years did it take to repair this ship with the special wax?
19 years, not 18, but 19 years.
Okay, so that's then, so in the 1540s and 50s. But we know that, just 40 years later, yes, in 1588, 88, just the date that they chose, we're told about Queen Elizabeth I and the Spanish Armada during the time of Shakespeare himself. Yes, so Madame Shakespeare, let's study a bit more about Shakespeare and this Spanish Armada. These things were happening during his lifetime. So we'll see if it's any normal history or anything suspicious. People were worried that this armada of ships is coming to invade. Thousands of Spanish are coming to England and to London, and they're going to attack because of the Catholic Church. So now what do they tell us?
According to historians, there were other ships called Mary Rose. One of the ships called Mary Rose participated in battles against the Spanish Armada in 1588. Historians say that the Spanish Armada had around 19,000 soldiers.
Sure, everyone was scared, yes, that they're now coming with 19,000 soldiers to invade England. So now the Spanish Armada is coming to England, yes? And let's see, you can read it and tell me the story of what exactly happened.
According to historians, the Spanish Armada was first seen coming to the English Channel on 19th July 1588.
Oh my God, they're so terrified. They've just seen it. It's arrived in England, basically, in English waters. On what date again?
The 19th of July 1588.
Sure, this is true history. Yes, and they've got all these paintings and all these things and other historical books that they're going to say, it's all true. Can't you see? Yes?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Oh, yes. So the thing is, people believe these things. Yes, and this is the history that they have told us. Yes, so we noticed the other Mary ship, the other famous Mary ship. Yeah, if you look at the numbers again, read the last paragraph again and pay attention to the numbers.
It's that the ship called the Mary Rose also fought against the French, but during another war. This warship sunk while it was fighting against the French during the Battle of the Solent on 19th July 1545. The warship had a history of around 33 years in service.
Sure.
1933, yeah, 19, the numbers 19 and 33.
Yes. So there is a relationship between these numbers. So if anybody reads my books, it explains the 19 and the 33. I'll show an example from my book Secrets of Kabbalah and from the book 33 Degrees. Many people don't know that 19 is 33. And the thing is, if anybody understands, how geometry works and how these things work, then the thing is, you'll begin to understand it. In fact, I'll send you a diagram of it from my books, then people will be able to notice that in the flower of life, people will have to check in their own time. There is 19 round circles in the flower of life. Yes? And so when the flower of life is seen three-dimensionally, yes, what we see is that it turns into the 19 round circles when they become circular as a ball or a sphere. Yes, it forms the shape of a three-dimensional cube. Yes, with 33 round balls. It forms basically a perfect cube. If anybody understands this, then they will understand what this is about. Yes, You will find this in history. You're going to find this in the literature. You're going to find this in many things. And then the other numbers like 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all of them are within the other circles, as you can see. Can you see it? Yes?
Yeah.
Can you see how it becomes a cube? Or like the Kaaba.
Yeah.
Well, you know, many people say it's a cube, but in fact, it's actually not a cube. But it's very important to notice that it's similar to a cube. It's similar, and it's called Kaaba or cube. Cube. Yes, so these things are very important. But so if anybody wants to understand these things, yes, the 19 is explained more deeply in my book, Secrets of Kabbalah, and its significance with the 33rd degrees in my book, 33 Degrees. You know, so we see that the Spanish Armada arrived basically in England in English waters, yes, on the 19th of July, 1588. But if anybody studies the history of that time, what we're being told is this. You can actually read it yourself, and then you can decide if this history is actual history or is it just a fairy tale they made up. So,
according to historians, the English tried to stop the Spanish Armada the year before. Many historians say that a famous Englishman called Sir Francis Drake attacked the Spanish fleet in Cadiz on 19th April 1587. Some historians say that this date was 29th of April 1587.
So we are being told this history, yes? And so they're giving us these famous names, Sir Francis Drake, showing us paintings and everything, and showing us, hey, they were real people, they all existed. Yes, so he attacked the Spanish Armada, yes, the one year before. But there is a problem with the dates, yes, that many people have noticed. But if anybody looks at the so-called history that they're telling us, and you examine this, But
evidence from the 19th century shows that historians have been saying for a long time that Sir Francis Drake attacked the Spanish fleet in Cadiz on 19th of April 1587. The photo above shows the date, 19th April 1587, in the Dictionary of National Biography. Historians say that this was published around 1885.
Yeah, even that is a fake too. It's a long story. Yes, because the history of the printing press doesn't make sense. So we're told about the story of Queen Elizabeth and Mary. Yes, and so let's just have a look at some of the basic details.
According to historians, the reason why the Spanish Armada went to England is because Mary, Queen of Scots, was executed after she was kept as a prisoner for 19 years by Queen Elizabeth I.
Sure. I'm sure everybody believes this. Yes? But
I'm sure.
When we check English history, the more you check it with the 19 code, you will find there is no history. Nobody knows the real history of England. Yes? They're just telling you just a lot of rubbish. They're just telling you 19. It's based on 19 and the Kabbalah or the cube and the mathematical layout, all the history, all the manuscripts, everything. We'll go into it in further detail. So now what do they tell us about Mary, Queen of the Scots, who was prisoner for 19 years? And because of her, the Spanish Armada arrived on the 19th, and it came with 19,000 soldiers. But Sir Francis Drake tried to defeat them a year before on the 19th. Yes, that's because, you know, King Henry VIII, yes, broke off with the Catholic Church. And then Mary tried to reunite with the Catholic Church after 19 years. But so what do we know about Mary, Queen of Scots? Please tell us.
According to historians, Mary, Queen of Scots, became the Queen of Scotland while she was a baby and went to France when she was 6 years old. She returned to Scotland on the 19th of August 1561, a few weeks before she was 19 years old.
Sure. Yes.
This is just so repetitive now with 19.
Yeah, if anybody can't see it, then they must be stupid and dumb. I'm sorry. No. The thing is, it's their choice. It's up to you. So now the thing is, why did they kill Mary, the Queen of the Scots? What is the story?
According to historians, Mary, Queen of Scots, was executed because she had a claim to the English throne. Historians say that Queen Elizabeth I was declared to be an illegitimate child of King Henry VIII and his wife Anne Boleyn. Why? Because Anne Boleyn was executed on the 19th of May, 1536, and the marriage was annulled.
Yeah, the marriage was cancelled on the 19th of May. So because of that, they're fighting over the throne of England. So now the thing is, we're showing all this history and these places. They're saying, look, here's the evidence that Queen Elizabeth existed. Here, have a look. Do you know what this place is? Don't read anything. Just look at the picture. Don't read. Now, when you look at the
a ruined castle.
No, it looks like an old damn factory to me. Fargin factory. Look at these windows. Yeah, it just looks like a factory from the 19th century or something that, you know, probably got burnt out, disused, and whatever. That's what it looks like to me. Yes? What type of a castle does that look like to you? But, of course, they've modified it, and they are actually going to tell you, yes, that, oh, it's a castle. It's called Kenilworth Castle. Because they've modified it.
And it's on the English Heritage website.
Yeah.
So
well, you can see they've built a bogus wall around it. They've made it look like a castle. And so the thing is, they're going to say that, it was famous. How do we know Queen Elizabeth existed? Because this is what they tell us about these sites. This is a famous site. It's only famous because of this. What do they tell us? What is the reason why this Kenilworth Castle is famous for?
During her last and most famous visit in 1575, she stayed for 19 days, the longest she ever remained in a courtier's mansion.
Ah, so she stayed here for 19 days. That's why it's a castle. You see? Yeah. And the thing is, that's what they're telling us, official history. People believe all this stuff. I don't even know why. Yes? You could just read it, mainly museums, all these websites, they're all telling us these things. So now we are going to have a bit more look at previous poets and other things in Shakespeare's work and compare them. Yes, that they say poetry was written in English, and they're saying that this old poetry is evidence that there was an older English language and everything. So the thing is, let's go back a few hundred years, and we'll start from during the time of the Vikings, the Anglo-Saxons, and other things. So the thing is, we have here the story of King Stephen, yes, who was King of England after Henry I. What do we know about him? What do they tell us?
Although Stephen had tried to continue Henry's method of government during the war, the new government characterized the 19 years of Stephen's reign as a...
Yeah, and they called it 19 years of a mess or anarchy when King Stephen was ruling. This is what they're telling us, you see? And so 19 is found in strange situations, and even in the things of, even in, not just there, but even centuries later or after Shakespeare, when Freemasonry was set up, yes, in England and in Scotland. Let's have a look at the history of Freemasonry. The last paragraph, what are we told?
The first Grand Lodges were formed in England in 1717. 19 years later, in 1736, Scotland had her own Grand Lodge, even though technically both nations had united under the one crown and one parliament.
How many years later did Scotland have its own lodge, did you say?
19.
Sure. Sure. Yes.
It's just across all different time periods and all different authors and all different historical figures.
So there is something strange about the history. Yeah, just there, and the thing is, even when we check in the history of cinema, yes, and we'll see some of these things in Shakespeare's plays. But I'll give an example. There's something that they call, that they call Miss en Abîme or Abîme. Yes, so it's supposed to be a film within a film. Yes, where a film contains a plot about the making of a film is an example of a Miss en Abîme or Abîme or however you pronounce it. Yes, so when we look at these things and we see it in relation to Shakespeare, yes, so with its potential for mega jokes, meter jokes and irony, the film within a film concept, the mise en abîme, yes, as it's known in academic circles, It feels like a normal modern invention, but in reality, a film within a film, or mise en abîme, the technique of placing an image within itself stretches back to medieval times, predating its notable appearance in Shakespeare's Hamlet. So they say that Shakespeare's Hamlet has a film within a film, which famously features a play within a play. So even in the 20th century, people say, you could tell us. Yes? In the modern day, yes, what do we know?
D.W. Griffith's 1909 film, Those Awful Hats, is one of, if not the first, on-screen examples offering a headwear-rich commentary on cinema etiquette delivered in a taut 3 minutes. 19 years later, Buster Keaton expanded the concept with The Cameraman, 1928, a later career.
So we see that a film within the film is used in these 20th century films, and it was done, in 1909, and then Buster Keaton did it 19 years later. We see all these things, and we believe that all this history is true, even the history of the early 20th century. Yeah, people believe these things. So the thing is, let's just have a look at some other things that are related to Shakespeare. We have the story of Austin, by Austin Wright, Tony and Susan. You could actually, I'll read the beginning. Tony and Susan, a gripping, thrilling ride. This is not. Yes, Ed's fictional story is mindly interesting, reads like an amateur. People are commenting, etc. And they say, total and utter waste of time reading this, Tony and Susan. The story within the story has been a thing for centuries. Even Shakespeare did it. So the thing is, many people talk about these things. An example is Tony and Susan by, Austin Wright. Many people, Tony and Susan is supposed to be a pretty well-known story by Austin Wright of a story within a story. Yes. So the thing is, what we do know about Austin Wright is that Nocturnal Animals was a 2016 American thriller, film written, produced and directed by Tom Ford in his second feature based on the 1993 novel Tony and Susan. This movie, it was out, and the thing is, many people saw it, but let's go through it. These things like many people have never been to a Shakespeare play. Yes, so this is Tom Ford's second feature film, and it stars a few certain people, and it's supposed to show a film within a film, many people say. And it premiered in 2016 and things like this, you see. So it goes on, and it won some awards and things like this, entered in international film festivals. And then what do we know about this film? Yes? So, in fact, you could read this. What do we know about this film?
Amy Adams plays Susan Morrow, a successful but miserable art dealer trapped in an unhappy marriage where her riches mean nothing. Her life is a hollow shell. When she was young in grad school, she was briefly married to a different man, Edward Sheffield, and he was the true love of her life. But Susan was too greedy, too bourgeois, too much like her mother to appreciate the creative sensitivity of a man like Edward. She wanted the trappings of a middle-class life and didn't support him in his artistic endeavours. 19 years later,
how many years? Excuse me, sorry to interrupt you, Madam Shakespeare. How many?
19 years later.
Okay, carry on from the beginning of that sentence again.
19 years later, a manuscript arrives on her desk. It's a proof copy of Edward's novel, soon to be published. It's dedicated to her, and it tells the tale of a couple just like them, brought to life for us on screen, as Susan reads compulsively.
Yes.
The protagonist.
But basically, you've got it. The film is based on this story that's based on the 19. You see?
Yeah.
Yes. So the thing is, these things, and they say Shakespeare did it too. So when we're looking at this, so this is a very great example. And so here we have the first folio is the first published collection of Shakespeare's plays, produced 7 years after his death. Its title is Mr. William Shakespeare's Comedies, Histories and Tragedies, etc. Yes, It groups his plays into those categories: comedies, histories, and tragedies. For the first time, they're telling us, yes, the first folio, yes. So this is the official history that they tell us. And then when we go through it, the Oxfordian theory of Shakespeare's authorship, there's many theories that contend that Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, was actually, Shakespeare himself. This is a theory that they are spreading, you see? So it's because they are spreading it, they're promoting it. You know, they spread and support many of these theories themselves. But anyway, let's have a look at, this De Vere character and see if this theory has any reality. Yes, let's have a look at De Vere.
So after Queen Elizabeth died in 1603, De Vere lived only 1 year longer. He died on the evening of June the 24th, 1604, coincidentally, Midsummer Night. The last 2 years of his life, the first quartus of Hamlet and several other plays were published under the name William Shakespeare. 19 years later, the first folio was dedicated to and financed by two brothers, the Earls of Pembroke and Montgomery. The first, William Herbert, had been a suitor to De Vere's daughter Bridget. The second, Philip, was actually De Vere's son-in-law, having wed his favourite daughter Susan.
So you see, they've invented the entire history. They've invented these characters that don't exist. It's like Professor Anatoly Fomenko, yes, from Russia, one of the greatest professors who goes through the history. Yes, Anatoly Fomenko. He says that he invented imaginary characters in history, so that you will believe the history and the fake history and everything else. So Anatoly Fomenko has shown that they've created imaginary characters in history, and they've mathematically arranged the history. And Professor Fomenko goes through this. My books, I've got more than 20 books, and many of them show that showed that they've used the mathematics too. And I focus more on the number 19 and the number 33. But for Professor Fomenko, I like what he says. I laugh when he says it, but it's actually true. He says that, they invented imaginary characters and imaginary events, and they've mathematically arranged it. In fact, he's done many charts to show that they've just copied the history from country to country and mathematically arranged things. Yes, and so the thing is, even done it, astrologically and everything. And so the thing is, of course, his collection of books, they're very long, and they're worth reading if anybody wants to do a deep study. Many of his books are called history, fiction, or science, but he's got many other books in Russian. I don't know if they're all available in English, but he draws charts, and he shows they've just invented these people's names and invented the dates and wrote everything and just invented everything. And the Jesuits and their allies and other people, the humanists, they just invented this history, and it's cool. I like it. It's fun. It's like a puzzle.
So even famous philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, Nietzsche, all fake, all invented.
Well, if you want, you could believe in them. But if you want more information about ancient Greece, I wrote about it that I can't seem to find ancient Greece. It doesn't exist. I couldn't find ancient Egypt either. I'm sorry to say, ancient Egypt didn't exist. Yeah? If anybody wants to check, they'll find it in this book. And ancient Egypt has got 19 all over it. 19 meters, 19 this, 19 that. So is ancient Greece. 19 this, 19,000, God knows. 19 BC, 1980. It's just a joke. Even ancient Greece didn't exist. I couldn't find these places. They're trying to make us think and believe in this theory. Hey, yes, because they're trying to show that, Edward de Vere, yes, actually existed. They're trying to show that these times actually were real. Yes, and so they're trying to show all these things. They've got paintings, writings, yes, and so these things, but there is no evidence that any of these things. And so they've made sure that, people question and say, oh, look at these paintings, look at this, look at the writing. This is Old English, this must be real, actual history. So they've got these manuscripts. But sure, when you read the details, what'd you call it? He died in 1604. Yes? Hamlet and several other plays were published under the name William Shakespeare. 19 years later, the first folio were dedicated to and financed by two brothers who were related to him. Yes? You know, one's his son-in-law, and the other one was, was a suitor or basically engaged to his daughter Bridget. You know, invented fake fictionary characters. So Professor Anatoly Fomenko has found all these things. But talking about fictional characters, yes, let's go to John Falstaff. So he is a fictional character who appears in 3 plays by William Shakespeare and is eulogized or whatever in a 4th. Yeah, so this is what they're telling us about John Falstaff. Then we've got this Helen Craig. She was a Scottish poet and novelist, and she was a correspondent of Scottish poet Robert Burns. They're telling us these people existed. Yes? So now what we find is when we study the works of Helen Craig and all these things, Yes, she wrote a book called Henry of Northumberland, or The Hermit's Cell, a tale of the 15th century. In fact, you could read this.
This novel opens with a preface. This novel opens.
Come on, Madam Shakespeare. Come on, speak up.
Okay, let me start again. This novel opens with a preface describing into Gothic discovery of the manuscript upon which the novel is founded. The manuscript Craig has discovered contains a narrative or a strong similitude to the principal event mentioned in the modern and very beautiful poem of The Hermit of Warkworth. And indeed, the major outlines of Craig's plot follow the narrative of this poem, a 3-canto ballad imitation published in 1771 by Thomas Percy. The story begins with the Earl of Northumberland pacing his castle, waiting for intelligence from the fatal field of Shrewsbury. A messenger arrives informing the Earl that the King and Prince Henry have been killed by the Earl's son, and Monmouth's worthy favourite, Sir John Falstaff, is prisoner to my lord your son.
Ah, Sir John Falstaff. Okay.
Yeah,
so carry on.
Clearly, Shakespeare, rather than Rapin or Hume, has been Craig's primary historical source. This intelligence turns out to have been false, and the Earl's son, Henry Percy, has in fact been killed in battle. Percy's wife goes mad with grief. Hotspur's only son, also named Henry Percy, must go into hiding. Disguised as a peasant's son, he travels towards Scotland under the protection of Lord Bartol, who dresses as a minstrel. While en route, Percy and Bartol traverse various Gothic milieux, such as dungeons, secret passages, and convents. They are watching a funeral procession in a convent when they see a pale, emaciated, spectre-like female figure with dishevelled hair and long black flowing garments. She springs forward, and here the manuscript breaks off in an imitation of Clara Reeves, the Old English Baron.
Oh, poor you. The manuscript breaks off. Okay. What a story you're telling us. No 19 so far. What a long story. It's boring. Okay, now, the next paragraph.
The story resumes 19 years later in 1424.
You mean you broke off the story, but now you're continuing it? Yes.
Yeah.
And you've got this John Falstaff character, and it continues 19 years later?
Yeah, 19 years later.
Nothing suspicious there. So you can see the centuries of this poetry and other things connected to Shakespeare, all these other people, even the actual history, and it's all just a joke. You see, now we're going to actually look at the history of England and other things at the time. So here is this castle. This is Hallis Castle or Hales Castle, however you want to pronounce it. Yes, 14th century castle. They're telling us 1.5 miles away from East Linton in East Lothian in Scotland. That's what they're telling us. Yeah, so many people, you know, they think, they look at this and they're going to say, hey, this is a castle. Yes, because you just see a bunch of walls there. It could be anything. You see? It could be anything. So now what do we know about this so-called alleged castle?
Okay, perhaps the name Hepburn rings a bell. In the 16th century, the English captured Halley's Castle during the Rough Wooing, the episode in which the English tried to force 7-year-old Mary, Queen of Scots, to marry Henry VIII's son. 19 years later, Mary stayed at Halley's Castle before her doomed marriage, James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell, who is believed to have been born here.
Sure. This Mary, who died on the after 19 years, yeah, who got executed, yeah, the English tried to force 7-year-old Mary, Queen of Scots, to marry Henry VIII's son. 19 years later, Mary stayed at this Halley's Castle. So they've got this, and they've got to show all these sites. They've got to explain to the world, what are these places doing here? Yes? Oh, don't you know this was a castle? Oh, don't you know that Shakespeare existed? The rest of them, yeah, you know, Queen Elizabeth was real at the time. Mary, Queen of the Scots, she stayed here, don't you know? Oh, 19 years after that, whatever. You see? And they're going to say, this is the evidence that Old English existed, Old Scottish, yeah, and all this history, it's all just a joke. Yes? So you see, what are we told? Wolf and Eadwacker. What is Old English?
Old English is not the English of Shakespeare, nor the English of Chaucer. We're talking about the language of Beowulf spoken by the Angles.
They're even telling us this. The truth is, we don't know any of this history. Yes? It's because almost everything they've told us is just a joke. So now the thing is, we've got this. Let's go through this so-called English history. Yes? So-called English history, we can go on, and you could tell us about this thing. Read the title too.
Wolf and Eadwaster is one of the most enigmatic Old English poems, since the story it alludes to is not known to us. It has given rise to many theories, of which perhaps the most widely credited is that the speaker, a woman...
They're just telling us it's English history, and they're saying it's Old English, the old original Anglo-Saxon. People can find a copy of this old Wolf and Eadwacker, story, and then you could read this. What do we know about the old history?
Even though the poem is a mere 19 lines, there are many differing interpretations.
How long is the poem of Wolf and Eadwacker or Wacker?
It's only a mere 19 lines.
Yes. So what we've got is something, people can check it themselves, and they're telling us that they've got a poem from the 10th century. This poem, they're going to say it's in the Exeter Codex and all these things. They're going to say, we've got these manuscripts in museums and everywhere else. It's all true. But this poem has got how many lines?
19.
Yeah, the Exeter Codex. And they're saying, originally non-English origin or Old English or whatever, Anglo-Saxon inspiration. They're going to say this, etc. But they say even though the poem is 19 lines, etc. So the thing is, they're telling us we've got this for centuries, we know this history, and this poem is in 19 lines. We're being told this history. People believe this history. Yes, then they show us images when we go to school, storybooks and everything, and say, this was England 1,000 years ago. Oh, this was the original history. People, you see? You gotta believe it. You believe it, don't you?
It's just very different. It's very difficult now to believe when you see 19 everywhere. There were even major conflicts, wars, English Civil War, probably, royal families. It's in it everywhere.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, there's many people who are trying to be modern-day Shakespeare's. Yes, and what do we know about Doris Lessing?
To Room 19 is a short story by British writer Doris Lessing, first published in her 1963 collection, A Man and Two Women.
Yeah, we're being told, even in modern-day works, people are using these things. To Room 19. She's a female writer today, yes? So we've got there, and she's written a great book or great short story, To Room 19. But let's go back in history and you can read this yourself.
Aphra Behn was the first English woman in history to work as a professional writer. The only thing more colourful than her
this is big history, man. It's big. She was what? She was the first what?
English woman in history to work as a professional writer.
Wow, she must be big time, man. You see? Yes, if you don't know her, then you don't know history. So we're being shown these things, told this history, statues in places, paintings, this, that, and we're being told this history. You got to believe it. I mean, you can't ignore these things. These people were real. They really existed. You know this? You know, she lived in the 17th century. That's what they're telling us. Now let's investigate these people. She was the female Shakespeare. You see? These are the type of stories that they're telling us in history. So that's what they're telling us in history. I forbid. You see? She's like a female Shakespeare. You know what I mean. Yeah, it's not a joke. This is real, man. This is big, man. We're getting on to something big here. Basically, some people say she's like Shakespeare's sister, man. She lived just a few decades later after Shakespeare. She's big, man. You gotta believe this history. What do we know about Shakespeare? Afra Ben, I mean.
The well-known Afra Ben wrote novels, poetry, and 19 plays that were performed on the stage.
Hang on. So, Afra Ben, she wrote how many plays that were performed on the stage?
19.
Oh, she's real. These manuscripts and plays are real. Oh, sure. You see? Now, the thing is, let's go back to Shakespeare's life story. You know, that, 19 years later in London, 19 years later it was published, 19 years later he died. For example, this is an important story. You can read it.
When Shakespeare was 19, his daughter was born. His daughter Susanna married a physician, John Hall.
How old was he when his daughter was born?
19 years of age.
Are you sure?
That's what they're telling me. 19.
Or are you just making it up?
No, I think they're making it up. They're making the whole history up.
Well, anyway, so now let's go through this. Yes, there's many of these poets, so these female poets. We've got Charlotte Mew.
Are you also going... What about Charlotte Bronte and Jane Austen? And...
We'll get to them, Madame Shakespeare. Okay. Yes, I know that you're Shakespeare's sisters. You know, you're always fighting with them, but it's a family affair. But we'll get to them in a minute. So Charlotte Mew was from the 19th century, and she was supposed to be, a great poet, Victorian poet. They're telling us this history. She was an English poet whose work spanned the eras of Victorian poetry and modernism. That's what they're telling us. That's what they tell us about this, and they've got photos and everything, and we believe that these stories are actually true. Yeah, so what we know about Charlotte Mew, the major details, what we find, she's not exactly Shakespeare's sister, but they always compare her to, not always, but often they mention her with Shakespeare. So what we know about her, they turn around and say that Arrowcombe Wood is what?
Arrowcombe Wood, the most perfect poem ever written.
Ah, wow, the most perfect poem ever written. Let's examine this, yes, and see. Yes, so it doesn't matter which century or anything. Let's have a look. Yes, you could read this.
The deceptive simplicity of Arrowcombe Wood as a poem is compounded by its formal structure. The entire poem is based around just 3 end rhymes, an A and a B rhyme in the first stanza, followed by the same B rhyme and a new C rhyme in the second. Over half of the poem, 19 lines, employ the B rhyme as their end rhyme. For comparison, the poem that directly follows Arrowcombe Wood in the 1921 edition...
So how many lines does this poem have?
19 lines.
Ah, nothing suspicious in that. Yes? So there's nothing suspicious in that. And many people have probably heard of this history. Great poet. Yes, English poet. Born in the 19th century, T.S. Eliot. One of the greatest poets, and using the English language, modernist poetry, etc. This is what they're telling us. Yes. And of course, they always compare him to Shakespeare. Well, many people do, to Shakespeare and T.S. Eliot. And they say T.S. Eliot towards the work of Shakespeare. Many people have done analytical works. Let's have a look and examine T.S. Eliot. Yes. And when we examine Eliot, what do we find in his history? Yes. This is what we find. Yes, let me just show. You could read this yourself.
There is no disguising an aroma of practical jesting. Eliot treats us to 19 lines of Ovid untranslated.
19 lines of Ovid untranslated in his work known as The Waste Land. So Eliot is telling us about Ovid, yes, in his poem called The Waste Land. And he reproduces 19 lines of another poem or something untranslated. Yes, in his poem. Yes. And what is the poem Wasteland that has these 19 lines? What is this widely regarded as?
It's widely regarded as one of the most important English language poems of the 20th century.
Of course. And the central work of modernism. Of course it's going to be one of the most important. It's got the 19 lines of Ovid. And so when we look at, many people don't know who Ovid was. And we saw that Roman poetry and the 19 lines. So what they tell us is that Ovid was this Roman poet who lived around the time of Augustus. This is the history that they tell us. And he's quoting Ovid. And then even Ovid, that history, there is no evidence that even he existed. So you could tell us about Ovid. Tell us about the life of this Ovid. Ovid spent the first 25 years of his literary career primarily writing poetry in elegiac meter with erotic themes. The chronology of these early works is not secure, but scholars have established tentative dates. His earliest extant work is thought to be the Herodes, letters of mythological heroines to their absent lovers, which may have been published in 19 BC. Although the date... I see. So, yeah, but they're guessing, and they're saying, we're going to guess when Ovid published his first ever works. Yes, his earliest ones, and... well, he must have started on 19! 19! Of course! That's when he started publishing them. Oh, it must be. I mean, it can't be 20, can it not? No. We can't make this mistake. It's got to be 19. So now, the thing is, we're going to go back to, William Shakespeare back there. And so when we see the entire story of, Romeo and Juliet, what do we see?
The first 19 lines spin out a wondrous description of mad wagon, charming enough to entertain a heavy heart, one might think.
Yes, it's the beginning. It's Act 1. Yes, so there's the thing is the introductions. Now we'll go through the introductions to understand about Shakespeare. Yes, and so these things. But what we know about what they're telling us is that Shakespeare made great quotes, or they created these great quotes themselves. So in The Merchant of Venice, they tell us one of the greatest quotes ever. The man that has no music in himself, nor is moved with concord of sweet sounds, is fit for treason, stratagem, and spoils. The motions of his spirit are dull as night, or basically dead, and his affections dark as the Erebus. Let no man be trusted, mark the music. So that we've got these great quotes in Merchant of Venice. I've made the words into a bit simpler English language. That's from The Merchant of Venice. So these are the things we actually think that Shakespeare wrote these things and all these things in The Merchant of Venice. But anyway, yes, let's have a look. So when it comes to music, let's see Shakespeare in this music. So have a look. You can read this yourself.
It is evident that by attentive, Lorenzo means attentive to everything but the music, easily distracted. It It's interesting that he also declares that Orpheus had no inherently magical powers. He was merely a conduit for the magical power of music. And then he goes on to assert that anyone incapable of being moved by music shouldn't be trusted. A mere 19 lines after his new wife says that she's incapable of being moved by music.
Wait a minute. You're trying to tell me when Lorenzo, when he says anyone who is incapable of being moved by music shouldn't be trusted. I mean, 19 lines after his new wife says she's incapable of being moved by music. Are you trying to say Lorenzo says this 19 lines later?
Yes.
Madam Shakespeare, can you explain why Shakespeare chose to write it 19 lines later?
It was his favourite number, obviously.
Did he exist? Which one is it? Did he exist or did somebody else write it using the 19 code?
Somebody else wrote it.
By the way, many people, they don't know Italia. The Merchant of Venice. Venice is in Italia. Lorenzo is one of the characters in The Merchant of Venice. Yes, by the way. And, Lorenzo, he makes this great comment. I like it. The man that had no music is the traitor or treason. Yes, and you should not trust this man. And he says it 19 lines after his new wife says that she is incapable of loving music. Lorenzo, yes, 19, Italiano. Venice is in Italy. Now let's go back to Hamlet. To Hamlet, what do we see?
The first 19 lines, the very first lines of Hamlet are famous ones because they so quickly create the mood of tension and
unease. So we see the first 19 lines are important. Yes? And many people have actually pointed this out. Yes? That's one place. There's other places where many people have done even analysis and everything to show that the 19 lines are very important. In Shakespeare's Hamlet, yes, split into groups of 4, and how you act these out, and then they tell you, use your voice and body to create such an atmosphere as possible, etc. But the first 19 lines are very important, because then you got the attention. Or simply, it's the 19 code. Yes, even in the history, that you get people's attention, but they are unaware of what is going on. You see? That people don't realize it, but you are using the codes of the Kabbalah. So that is a secret of success. The secrets of Kabbalah explains the 19, and when you bring it to life, it's the 33rd degree. So 19 is the 33. This is explained in my 2 books, Secrets of Kabbalah and 33 Degrees. Yes? So it's explained there. For example, we have a famous writer called Mark Twain. Can you tell me some pieces of work that he has written?
Mark Twain, Huckleberry Finn.
Wow, so you actually know him?
Yeah.
Yes. So Huckleberry Finn, they've even made dramas and films about it, yeah. Huckleberry Finn is pretty famous. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and these other things.
Oh, yeah.
And many people read these things. Mark Twain even says it. Yes, there is a secret for the success in literature, art. He even says it. So you could read this in the own words of Mark Twain. What does he himself say?
There are 19 rules governing literary art in the domain of romantic fiction.
Some say 22. But the thing is, basically, there is a 19 code or 19 rules in literature and art. So many of the great masterpieces of writing, yes, even the Bible, it's a great masterpiece in literature. So are the Vedas, so is the Islamic Quran, and so are many other books, not just these Shakespeare's or Mark Twain's. Yes, so that's why many people find these 19 codes in many things. It's like, if you understand this, many people in the press today, many of the writers in for television, for movies and other things, they understand this 19 code. And when people understand this code, the 19, which becomes 33, if you understand it and you do your work according to this rule, then the thing is, normally you create great masterpieces. I learned this pretty early in life. I was lucky. I wrote my some of my first great poems when I was 15, and I wrote my first book of poetry, completed it by the age of 20. I wanted to replicate some works and prose and poetry like Shakespeare, Oscar Wilde, and all these other things. You know, Oscar Wilde's works. I liked some of these things. I remember I wrote something that sounded, I wanted it to sound classical. I wrote this: I wish I could say I could fly away to a distant land to another day. And I was actually writing my first novel, you know, when I was 15. Completed it by the time I was 20.
Did you use 19 lines?
Of course I used the code and the rules.
Did you?
Come on,
and in your poem,
you've seen all my books, you've seen many of my works, and you've seen that I know these things like the back of my hand. Yes. So the thing is,
even back then, even when you were young,
by the way, let's forget me, Madame Shakespeare. Yeah, you don't want to get diverted. Yes. Oh, by the way, at the moment, right now, around this time, this week or next week, I've got some things that are coming out. Two videos are coming out on Raphael's channel. One's going to be called Irish and Celtic History. Unfortunately, the entire history is 19. All the Irish myths and the Celtic stories and everything, it's just a 19. It's fake. Unfortunately, I'm very sorry to say it. Many people think that, hey, maybe it's true or something. Yes, they can go through it. It's actually shocking. Then there is another video that Raphael has prepared right now called Druid and Gaelic Secrets in History. Unfortunately, yes, the Druids, the Gaelics, the Celts, the ancient Irish, all this history, it's just artificial and they've made it up. I'm very sorry to say, but that is...
So what is left? People will be asking, what is actually real? What is left?
You want me to give the secret away? I mean, are you paying me for this? I can't believe this. You want me to tell you something? I mean, what am I going to get in return? Madame Shakespeare.
You're enlightening everybody and will be deeply...
Oh, you want me to be your slave or something? You mean you want me to give you information for free? I mean, what the hell's going on here? Who's going to pay for my bread and my butter? Never mind.
We'll be deeply indebted to you for your sharing of this knowledge.
Well, I don't want to send the bailiffs round. That's going to cost me a lot of money to collect the debts. Indebted. Right, I'll go back again now. The Secrets of Kabbalah explains the 19. That's the basic. Now, the 33 degrees goes even further to show it how it is in reality in the world. And then I've written a book that's just come out recently called The New World Order to show how it affects the world and how they're using the 19 and this Kabbalistic or this code for successful things. Many people will call them inside jobs, like 9/11's an inside job. People will say it, and people will say, there was COVID-19 and all these other things. So you could talk about these things, but the main thing is, once you understand it, the thing is, you become awake. It's because it's not something superstitious. It's not imaginary. You can see it. You can see it in the news. You'll understand. You can see it in novels. You can see it in newspapers. You can see it in the media. You can see it, how people have designed the cities, the roads, the bus numbers, how everything works geometrically. So once you understand this, it's like, it's just, simple geometry and mathematics, and they've applied it to apply universal mathematics to falsify world history. Yeah, so that's what's going on. But anyway, Madame Shakespeare, we're nowhere near finished yet. So they're on Raphael's channel. So on Andreas's channel, yes, there is something coming out right now called Lord of the Rings. And I go through that to show, yes, the thing is, it's very shocking the Lord of the Rings and how history has been falsified. So on Andreas's channel on Zertus, there's it's going to be out, about the Lord of the Rings, and I'm sure many people will actually like that. They'll find it. Many people are they want to know. What is going on? Where do these people think of these successful books, successful movies, directors? I mean, why do many of these people, why are they on, just ordinary directors, ordinary writers? Hundreds of books are coming out. Why are they on six-figure salaries? 100,000, 200,000, 400,000 a year. I mean, what is it? What is it that makes them successful? So look out for the video, Lord of the Rings, on Andreas's channel. And on
so are you saying Tolkien didn't write it?
Well, if you want to know the secret, you'll have to wait for the video, Madam Professor Shakespeare. Shakespeare, you'll have to wait for it, when the video is out on Andreas's channel. That will go through the Lord of the Rings. And so many people think that the Druids exist, and the ancient Irish history, these amazing stories of Finn MacCool. Oh my God, I still love that story. Or these epic stories that were in England, Ireland, and France, Tristan and Isolde, or, throughout Northern Europe. Unfortunately, all of them, there's something strange about them. So the thing is, Harry Potter, the rest of them, they can watch all of these things. And on Nachiketa's channel, there's a great video I did, that people can see. It explains, Stephen King, yes, and the Gatekeeper and the 19, where they've gone to the land of 19. They can watch it on Nachiketa's channel. In fact, if you want, and you could put the links for these channels on the videos, or people could find it themselves. They could find it themselves. Let them go and find it. Yes, they could just type in David Ewing Jr. On YouTube, or David Ewing Jr. Tatari or something on YouTube. They'll be able to find them. Or the thing is, if some people want a shortcut, it will take them many years to understand the secret. So yeah, if people want me to tell the secret, I mean, I've already told a lot. I've actually written the answers, yes. Oh, by the way, what are you talking about? You've already read the books. 33 Degrees in Secrets of Kabbalah. It's a bit clear when I'm interviewing you in the beginning of this interview. You said, there's the 19. It's because you already know. Yeah, the thing. What are you talking about that I should tell you the secret again? You already know.
No, you should tell everybody, our listeners.
People can read it or go and study it themselves. The thing is, it's there. It's because the thing is, and they can go and check it themselves. If they check it themselves, it's good. If they spent a few years to understand it, because this information is very hard to find. And many people who are earning these big salaries, writing these books, working for these media channels, many of the news reporters, writers who are writing the news, they understand these geometric codes and everything. They worked hard. That's why they're getting these six-figure salaries. It's because they understand how these things work. And of course, unfortunately, many people amongst these people, they've invented imaginary characters and imaginary history. As Professor Anatoly Fomenko has pointed out, characters that didn't exist, ghost characters that people believe in. Yeah, that's
so why have they invented these characters to hide what?
Why don't you read all the books and you find out, Madam Shakespeare? Darling, I suggest that you read all the books.
I can ask you now. If they fabricated the whole of the Irish history, the Celtic history, then what are they trying to hide?
Actually, there's videos that I made with Raphael. Yes, the thing is that there's many reasons. It's like different people do things for different reasons. Now, with Raphael, I made 2 videos. One of them's called The New World Order China on his channel, and I go through it to explain how the New World Order works. Many people just seem to think that, when you're wearing your trainers or your shoes, it just come out of their ass, from their backside. It didn't. it's actually difficult to run the world. It's not easy. Many people think that, airplanes are just flying around. You go on holiday, the entire system, airports, the minerals, everything. It was a nightmare. So now the thing is, you will find this information of how and why many of the lies are done. Some people made lies for good reasons. Some people made lies for bad reasons. But of course, many people did these things because they understand the art of the Kabbalah and the art of the 33 degrees, and it makes good money, which it actually does. Yes, because all over the world, I'm just going through Shakespeare with you, but if people study this history everywhere else and everything else, and even if they read the new book, the New World Order, if you read that, it's shocking to see what these agendas are and everything else. And when you go through it, you turn and think, oh my God, this is more organized than we can imagine, that it makes you question what type of technology is out there. Yes?
They're way ahead in technology.
It's not about they. It's like I myself have seen some things flying in the sky that are traveling at 5-6 kilometers a second, or 5-6 miles a second. Other people have seen it. Many people have filmed it. Yes, they've seen objects like that in the sky that are traveling that fast, 5 or 10 kilometers a second. You see? Yes. That's something like 20,000 miles an hour or 20,000 kilometers an hour. So the thing is, when we look at the codes and the layouts of thousands and thousands of historical manuscripts and documents around the world, and they're all mathematic, that is when we know that something is wrong. Now, another thing is, nobody is talking about this. Nobody is talking about it. And if people are saying, hey, David, give us an answer or something. Yeah, I've said this before. There is this strange book that nobody seems to mention. But there is a strange thing in the Quran that nobody warns you about the number 19. But this Muslim Quran, it says something strange. It gives you a warning about a fire or something. It uses the Arabic word nar or nar, however you want to pronounce it. It's similar to another Arabic word called nur, which means light, and fire is a light also. But it also says that this is a fire that burns you and something or whatever, and nobody can escape it or something. And then it says that over the fire is 19. And it says that this is basically a test and something. And actually many of these mythological stories that we find in Stephen King or Lord of the Rings and all these other places, if you watch these new videos and other things, if you read my books, you'll find that many of these myths and stories are actually copied from the Quran and remodified, remodeled, reinvented, etc., and other things, and made into bigger stories and etc. But the Quran is probably one of the only books that I found is probably the oldest that we could verify, more than 200 or 300 years. Nothing else could be orally verified. And the thing is, if the Quran did have a written original, we don't have that right now. Yes? If it was written on tablets or paper or somewhere else, we don't have access to that. Most of the manuscripts are forgeries, and the manuscripts, even these websites, they have 10% of errors in the translation and the meanings. That's why many people are fighting over it. Oh, by the way, the Crusades and all the murders and all these wars that we had was because of Biblists, evangelists and Quranists, because they were fighting about the meaning of words, that they killed people. That is one of the reasons why they lied in world history, where they separated
over the meanings of words. So Crusades and wars were fought because of the difference.
Study the Nicene Creed, Madame Shakespeare. Yes? Because they were trying to define the essence of God and all these other things, and the meanings of words, and the essence of Christ. Was Christ the biological Son of God? Shall he have this title or shall he not? So when they turned it into definitions and meanings, this is when those people who did this, it led to conflicts and wars. And we see this online. Evangelists who are fighting, or everyone knows that the average Protestant church, or average, Christian or average evangelist, they're very nice people. I mean, you can go to many churches. They will help drug addicts or alcohol addicts. They help homeless people. It's a great system. The churches are amazing, many of the Protestant churches. And the thing is, they do amazing, great works. Yes, because they've separated some of these things. But when you see some of the crazy evangelists who are trying to give definitions to words, and there is a 19 code in the Bible, yeah, Madam Shakespeare, yes, if we ever have time, yes, and if we do further interviews, then I'll go through it. But the thing is, we'll have to continue, about William Shakespeare some other time, because we've spoke quite a lot today, and we'll continue it from. We're nowhere near finished. Yes, we're nowhere near finished. But the thing is, as you could see, this 19 is very important. And the thing is, you're saying, "Hey, have I explained a lot? You've read it in the books. What do you think of these 2 books, 33 Degrees and Secrets of Kabbalah?" You tell me for a change now. I've told you.
Sorry, what was the question? What do I think of?
God, forget it. I'm not going to ask again. Forget it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
No, it's very, the books are very enlightening. It explains.
You already knew the question, but you wanted me to repeat it. That's malicious.
No, I think.
You mean you're trying to tell me the New World Order is bad, and you're treating me bad? I'm supposed to be your guest, by the way.
No, I think these books, because I've read your other books in the past, and I think these books are much better and much more informative than your other books. So I think well done to that.
Did you understand the 33 degrees and the 19 from these books or not?
Yes, explained very well.
Yes.
Very well.
And the thing is, there you go, since you've read the books, so you know. When I first started telling people about squaring the circle and the 33rd degree and the 19, nobody's ever heard of it, because you've got all these so-called blogs, so-called truthers. They're all trying to tell you these things, saying this is the 33rd degree, it's that, this is the secret, it's that. Many people guessed a few things in the numerology, but the thing is that they didn't notice the 19. It's because this is part of the art. It's the success. It's because if you understand it, then you can apply it. And if you really apply it, then the other person who's reading it, like you've read Hamlet, Macbeth, and all these other things, we've nowhere near finished. I only went through small parts of Shakespeare works. We'll have to do, another part on this and other things. But if anybody goes through,
I'd really appreciate that, because I'd like to go into Jane Austen and Charlotte Bronte too, and maybe other
I would really
authenticity of all.
I would really appreciate it. Yes, since you're indebted, to pay up your debts, Madam Shakespeare. You see, or I'm going to have to send the bailiffs round. And that's why I like the New World Order. Yes. So, how much am I going to be paid, by the way, Madam Shakespeare?
You're doing it out of the kindness of your heart.
I'm sorry, but my heart's in pain right now. You see, the 19.
Write poetry. Poetry is the food of love, and I'm sure it would ease your pain.
Yes. Oh God. Anyway, Madam Shakespeare, let's leave it at that. And the thing is, if anybody wants more information, it's in these books, and we'll continue about William Shakespeare. Last time we've not covered much of him. We've actually covered very little. I mean, it's actually so much. I mean, Shakespeare wrote so many works. When we go through them, we're actually going to go through the details, but it'll have to be next time, unfortunately. So have a great day. Let's leave it at that. Okay, yes, have a nice day.
Okay, thank you, David. Thank you for your time. And it's changed my view of English literature. And I can't wait for the next time we speak.
Okay, yes, have a nice day. Okay.
Okay, and you. Thank you, David.
Bye.